Hello everyone, welcome to the tutorial on plagiarism. Well, my name is Bonolo and I'm a tutor for HLE in the HSS faculty. Now, as I've said, our topic today is plagiarism, so let us unpack it. What is plagiarism? Is the first question you may want to ask. Well, plagiarism essentially is academic theft, as you can see on the screen, right? Meaning that you are stealing something, essentially. While a more formal definition of plagiarism would be that plagiarism is the practice of reproducing someone else's work or ideas and presenting them as your own. Now, as you can see there, we have a joke, right? So it says, what do you mean all the facts are wrong? What do you mean all the facts are wrong? I copied everything straight off the internet, which shows that the student in this picture has actually failed because the student has actually copied everything straight off the internet, which means that the student has actually plagiarized because the student has reproduced someone else's work or ideas and presented that as his or her own, right? So another joke that I have is like racism, sexism, and now plagiarism. Even the word itself sounds like a crime. So why would you want to plagiarize? Now, with knowing that what plagiarism is, we need to understand how does it really happen, because it breeds a lot of confusion just knowing what it is, but not knowing not knowing exactly how it happens, because oftentimes we think that just copying and pasting is the only type of plagiarism we have, because that is the one that we are actually familiar with, right? But I'm going to introduce you to a couple of types which will outline to you and actually show you that it can happen in different forms and varieties, right? Firstly, we have outright copying, right? This is when the plagiarizer copies the ideas of another and reproduces them exactly as they stand. Now, with this type of plagiarism, you take whatever text you take from the source, you take it exactly as it is, and now you reproduce it as if it is your own, right? Now, nothing has changed in this segment or in this type of plagiarism, meaning that you've taken it word for word as it stands in the original source and present it as your own in your own research paper or assignment. Now, the second type of plagiarism is called paraphrase plagiarism. You are often made familiar with the idea of paraphrasing, which means taking texts and actually writing them in your own words. Now, you think that, why have I still plagiarized if I have paraphrased? That is the question you might ask. Now, the thing is that even though you actually paraphrase, you still have to acknowledge the source, because writing the idea in your own words doesn't actually change the idea itself, but you have just reproduced it in different words. Now, the idea still belongs to the owner, so that is why it is still essential at that stage to actually acknowledge the source, right? Then we have what we call patchwork plagiarism, right? This is the third type. This happens when the plagiarizer patches another's ideas into his own by borrowing phrases and clauses from the original source. Like, I've practically thought of ways in which this could actually happen. Say that you have a text which you are actually working on, and you feel that maybe you would like to use the ideas from that text, right? But you finding difficulty with actually understanding the text, but you see that it is relevant or that you would like to use it. Maybe you think that, oh, this one will get me an A, right? So you try to actually incorporate that into your idea, but you fail in that regard. And what you do is that you take your own ideas and then you patch the author's ideas into your own. Now, without still acknowledging that the ideas that you've actually, or the phrases and clauses that have actually borrowed, belong to another source and not you. Now, what you've done is that you've borrowed phrases and clauses from the original sources and integrated them and made them one with your own. But still, what remains is that the main idea that stands here is that part of your work is still not your own yet, and still now, part of your work is stolen. Part of your work is paraphrased. Is actually, plagiarized. Now, this you have to understand, because now the fact that you actually borrowed phrases and clauses and not the whole thing doesn't mean that it is your work. Part of your research topic or your research assignment or your paragraph is still plagiarized, because that is still not your work, and you need to acknowledge the source of that particular text, right? Now it says, we have a little picture here that says plagiarism also means paraphrasing. Now, I indicated to you that there's a type of plagiarism called paraphrase plagiarism. Now, let us see what it says. Even if words are changed and reorganized, a citation is required. Exactly what I said. This is what makes you understand what constitute paraphrasing as plagiarism as well. Because now, even if it's in your own words, it doesn't change the fact that it is still not your idea. Therefore, you need to cite it. You need to acknowledge the source, right? It also entails summarizing. Even if there is concise or boiled down, or even if there is a concise or boiled down rewrite, a citation of original source is required. Now, sometimes paraphrasing may mean you write it in your own words, but it can also mean that you actually summarize it. And in that case as well, you need to acknowledge the source. Okay, when they talk of, this is just additional types that make you understand two types of plagiarism: intentional and unintentional, which shows you that sometimes you may paraphrase willingly, so knowing that you're actually paraphrasing and that being what you want to do. But sometimes you may do it unintentionally, carelessly, so maybe you have pure documentation, then maybe you quote excessively, maybe you have failure to use your own voice. Now, sometimes it happens intentionally, and then you copy your friend's work in a test as well. Some people think that it happens in assignments only. You can actually plagiarize in tests as well by copying from your neighboring friend. And then buying or borrowing papers. Say you use papers from a previous student who was doing the same, who had the same assignment topic. Now you're saying you're going to use exactly that, or maybe you buy it from that person, right? Cutting and pasting, okay? Borrowing certain phrases, using things from the internet, from Google and stuff, and just copying and pasting those things. So this is just additional information to just broaden your understanding as to how it actually happens, the different types of plagiarism, right? Now, I formulated 6 guidelines for you on the screen, as you can see, that tell you how to avoid plagiarism, because it is one thing just to know what is plagiarism and in what form it comes, but it becomes another thing when you have to actually not plagiarize, because you can still understand it and know what the concept entails, but actually not know how to put it into practice, because you'd still plagiarize, knowing how to paraphrase, knowing how to summarize, knowing that you have to cite, but you'd still find yourself plagiarizing. So I formulated a few guidelines for you to actually help you in that regard. The first guideline says paraphrase. Write in your own words or summarize. Paraphrase in the actual sense is that understand the text that you get from the original source. Read it with understanding and try to integrate that into your own ideas. Know that also you can agree or disagree with the source. So sometimes don't be too strict in saying that you want to use that source. As an academic, you have the right to actually agree or disagree. So you can actually take what that person has said and integrate it into your own argument, right? Cite that which you have paraphrased, which is the second guideline. Whichever source you use, cite that source. Even though you've paraphrased, it is important to cite that source. Now, the third guideline says quote. If you use direct speech from a source, which you cannot actually paraphrase, you have to put quotation marks from onto that source, because now you are showing that is someone else's idea or speech, and that you are using it exactly as it is. And the fourth guideline is cite, even though you have actually used a direct quotation and that, or even if it's an indirect quotation, and that you have actually put quotation marks to show that it is someone else's speech or idea, but you still have to cite that maybe in your in-text, or and then maybe in your bibliography. You still have to continue to actually cite. The fifth guideline is reference. Now, after you have made all your citations in your document, you have to compile a reference list of all the citations we've made in your research paper. This will usually be done in alphabetical order, and your referencing guide, which we'll later talk about as we talk about how to cite, will show you how to properly do this, right? You will have to have your referencing guide in access so that you will be able to utilize this guideline properly, because now you need to now compiling a references, it'll tell you how to list a book, a journal. It'll tell you how to list an internet source, the proper procedure to follow in doing that, how it should be done, so that your referencing is done properly. It is essential and is very, very, very important that you know how to use your referencing guide. Now, the sixth guideline is to simply go through the 5 guidelines again, just to make sure that you have actually done everything in the guidelines. Thank you. Now we say how to cite, and whether are there any consequences if you actually do not cite, right? Now, here I have an example of something that is paraphrased, just to generally show you that you have to actually paraphrase in some sort of way, right? So you can read this example, and then what I say is that NB, the referencing guide, is important. It is important to use the referencing guide when you are citing. That will tell you actually how to cite in different circumstances, right? Thank you. Now we have an example now where it just gives you the original source, right? And it shows you the in-texting, right? Where you see the in-texting where it says Lee 2005, and in some way it says Smith 2005. This is just an illustration to show you that this is maybe how you would actually in-text, and how that in-text would be in your reference list. Now, it is important to understand that when you find Jones C, Smith A, these are your authors, and the ones in italics will be your titles, because that is how you're supposed to. Now, just to put a lot of emphasis on this, your referencing guide is going to teach you how to do these things. So there are a few guidelines I might give you. You have quotations, which I told you to have to put quotation marks and actually cite the quotation. You'd have secondary sources where you actually have to cite the primary source of that as well. You have text that refer to more than one author. Then you'd have to use, if there's two, if it's just one author, then it's just that author. If there's two, it's maybe Smith and Jones. But if there's more than two, you'd have to use abbreviation et al., which means and others. But you would use the abbreviation et al. But know that you don't. And then you have anonymous authors, right? Authors which you find a credible source which you want to use, but you don't actually know whether who the source is, because the source chose not to disclose his or her identity. Then you use the abbreviation anon. But let me tell, with the reference lists alphabetical order, the basic thing here is that I will not be able to go through the referencing guide in detail with you now, but that's why I'm saying it is essential to have the referencing guide with you at all times. Now, to close off our session, I have a few jokes just for you to read there. But one thing that is important, one thing that I want to highlight, be original and don't plagiarize. And then there are a few jokes right there to see you. So with that being said, guys, thank you for listening to this tutorial. And I hope that it was fruitful and you learned a lot from it. And from me, Bonolo, your tutor, just goodbye and see you again next time.